Welcome back, everybody, and we are going to be doing the clothing edition of our little project here. So drawing clothing over a body, I would always recommend that you have the body drawn first. It is a lot harder to pretty much draw the clothing first and then draw the body into the clothing. It doesn't seem like it would be harder because you would theoretically have less to draw. But then when you draw the clothing first and then put the body into the clothing, it just seems like everything tends to go wrong a lot more easily. You put the hands or the arms into the shirt sleeves, the hands end up being too big, too small, and the shirt sometimes, a lot of the times for some reason, the shirts always end up being like really broad shouldered for the size of the head, and just proportionally everything just doesn't want to work right. And everything tends to be a lot more square and blocky as opposed to looking like it's fabric laying over a body. So I always recommend drawing a body first. So I got my rib cage going, and when you know that the character is going to be clothed, you don't have to worry as much about certain things. Like filling in all the little tiny details, where the breasts go if it's a girl, on a guy, where the chest is, the muscles and the abs, and so on and so on. Really, you just need your basics. So I'm going to put in kind of a shoulder line here. And because I put in that shoulder line, that means that I need to kind of change the angle of my torso, my rib cage. So I'm going to make it a little bit more like so. So that way I get that lean. Just because an arm goes up, if one arm goes up or both arms go up in the same way, but if you start adding leans and tilts to a body, everything moves. Nothing is left in basically a straight line because the body has to compensate for where the weight goes. So I'm just drawing a very simple little body to put clothes on to show you the rough idea. There's my arms. There's my arms going that way. So basically we got a ballerina head going on here. I'm not going to dress her like a ballerina, but more or less you get the idea. Got my neck going. Like so. Now, if you watched my How to Draw Bodies class, I did show you guys how to start with a head first, but here's the thing. Everybody learns and draws differently. For me, I always start with the rib cage and the hip area. I don't know why, I always have, because I know that the rib cage is a rectangular shape. I know, and I've drawn people so many times that I know what my rectangular shape normally always looks like. Now, if I'm drawing a kid or somebody with different body proportions than what is my average person that I draw, then I know how to, then I'll start with the head, and then I'll go ahead and do all the normal stuff. But let's see here. So, and then here is where my hip bones are essentially, and that means that, and the spine has a little bit of a curve up here, and then it goes down this way. Start up here. I never start all the way at the top of this square, and I know the square is not, it's a little bit lopsided, but I got a rough idea of what I want. Think of the top corner of the square getting cut off when the stomach area ends up meeting the legs. Vague body to dress clothes in. Now, when it comes to shirts, I like to start with the collar area. So if it has a collar, so if I have my neck here, and then it goes down into the shoulder area, like you can see. The neck's a little thick. Let's shave that down. Now, just to show you this area up close, which is all of this, once I have my neck pretty much down, I know where my shoulders are going. Here's how I normally start my shirts. If they're collared, I will come from the back, and I always start higher. And then I will cut off around the shoulder here. And when it comes to drawing clothing, very rarely is anything rounded. You end up, and especially in anime, you end up drawing with a lot of straight lines. It might take several straight lines to make a rounded effect, but everything is always a straight line, usually. So I come around, like so. Let's cut it in just a little bit more, because let's say this is a button-down shirt. Come up, and come from around the back. I do typically put a little rounded corner right here, which is actually just that coming from around behind the neck area. It's just a little triangular shape. And then I come down, and let's say this is the collar, the end of the collar here. Come back up, and then angle over. Now, you can end it here if you want, and just go straight into the line, or you can leave a little space and come on over. And then it's pretty close to the exact same thing over here. Now, especially if you don't have a character that is standing straight, looking perfectly at you, you know, very straight arms down and kind of a look, you can even change up how things are on your character that you're drawing. Because as bodies move, the clothes will shift on the bodies. So you don't have to, you want things to look like they're the same. Like, for instance, if I was drawing this collar, unless this is a very not standard kind of clothing look, like maybe it's designer fashion and, you know, it's weird looking, then obviously there's a humongous exception. But if you're doing, like, for instance, a schoolgirl or somebody in just normal clothing that you see every day, it's going to look fairly similar to the other side. Now, when you have straight line, straight line. Now, this area here with the buttons, I kind of vaguely drew buttons down just to give me an idea of how far I wanted to bring this collar down. So when you draw something that goes over the buttons, typically whatever the top button is that buttons to the front panel of clothing, the front part of a shirt, a little bit of the shirt is going to curve over the top of that button. So you're just going to have like a little partial button there. And then the other shirt underneath is going to be nice and straight, like so. So this is how I typically start my shirts. I normally start with the collar area, and anything that goes behind or goes over, you can see how a lot of that looks. And here's the best part. Because I already drew the body underneath it, the shoulder area, so on, which, you know, with this whole big body, I would end up doing a lot of this. So you want to draw everything lightly, as always. You just come in with an eraser and you erase the body itself, so that way, you know, it doesn't show through the shirt anymore. And now this shirt feels like it is on top of something, rather than feeling like its own separate entity, which makes everything look a lot nicer and a lot more realistic in anime terms. And keep in mind, anime, when people do draw anime, they do draw it observing reality. There's a lot of realistic observation. And normally it's just a style and way, like a lot of artists, they still observe reality to basically come up with a toolkit in order to draw something in a particular style in a particular way. So, all right, we have this going on. So let's go ahead and I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to show, instead of doing that, I'm going to do something a little bit smaller. And I'm going to do just a t-shirt. I'll show you kind of another way of showing something flatter going behind. So let's just make this a fairly simple shirt top. I'm just sketching all that in real quick. Now, instead of just leaving this flat going over the neckline, I'm going to raise it above the neckline and make it disappear behind. Because see, here's my neck. I'll go ahead and darken that in, so that way you guys can see it. This line still ends at this neckline, but I took this over and behind, so that way, again, it feels like it's going over something, like it's going around a form. With anime, it's very, very clever. It's super simple. It basically takes very complex structures and very complex ideas and boils them down to the simplest form and the simplest way of showing it. So that way you can focus more on more beautiful things. Obviously, clothing can be a beautiful thing, so maybe you do that a little bit more detailed if that's the focus. A lot of the times in anime, it tends to be hair. Hair is so much fun to draw, especially if it's long hair or in some weird particular style. The hair tends to be a lot more the focus, more or less. Clothing can be as well. Anyway, so we have our collar going on. I'm going to do just a simple t-shirt. Now, typically in anime, you will see t-shirts come out past the shoulder. So let's say this is where the skin area is. You see it come out past the shoulder and then just angle downwards and meet up with the rest of the skin. And then it'll come around for our sleeve. And the sleeve comes past the arm and then comes round. So that way it feels like, you know, the sleeve's a little bit bigger. And then we can come back up. Now we know basically the armpit's somewhere in here. If I were to draw the muscle, which we don't need, but just for your own sight, let's see here. Let's say this is a lady pants. Get a vague idea of where those are. Now, because this is a little bit more to the side, we see the rib cage here. This would be basically armpit area. So we know where the shoulder is. We know roughly where the boobs are. Okay, so I marked my armpit. I'm going to erase the body underneath so that way you guys can see what I'm doing. Now, this is going to be for a little bit later, so I'm going to show you a little bit more like the wrinkles and the forms and things like that in just a moment. That'll be a little bit later. We'll go ahead and do the rest of our shirt here. Now, because this is a sharp, steep angle, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line here. And because this shirt is a little bit looser, and I'm going to go ahead and make a little hook here, so that way, again, it looks like it goes all the way around. This shirt is a little bit looser, so the arm is up. Again, let's say this is a ballerina, more or less, in her regular everyday clothes. So maybe the sleeve does not come up as high on this side because it kind of fell down the arm a little bit. So make sure I have enough. Yeah, because normally it would be like up here because that's where it is down here. But that's not how fabric really works. So I'm going to draw it a little bit shorter. And because it's falling down, this is the underside. Normally, when you see motion, because our arm is going that direction, the excess fabric tends to be on the opposite side of where our motion is going. So this is this way a little bit. And also the excess fabric typically is on the underneath side, whatever is underneath. In this particular case, underneath is either here or behind the arm a little bit more. Because this is actually kind of moving towards us. And my kitten's going to be yelling apparently. So it's moving towards us in space a little bit. So it's kind of in this area behind the arm plus over to the side. So I'm going to lightly draw in the armpit area. Now, because the arm is all lifted up here, if you've ever lifted your arm like this and bent to the side like this before, you'll know that the shirt, whatever shirt it is you're wearing, it might not be long enough to cover from where your pants are to where the bottom of your shirt is. You end up kind of lifting it a little bit. And because of that, we got our armpit area here. Normally t-shirts aren't designed to go all the way over here like this. So I'll put a little bit of extra fabric going down the side, down the body, and I'm going to bring it off of the rib cage. And bring it over here, and that's a little too far. Over here to the side, and meet it back up with the rib cage there. Now we have a shirt. I'm going to go ahead and erase all the body underneath. I'm going to erase a little bit of the boobage. I'll show you what to do with that in a minute because of the next step. And there we go. We have a t-shirt following a body shape. Now for the next part. The next part is pretty crucial to learn and know, and you only need to know 3 things. When it comes to lines in the body, in the fabric of a shirt or any kind of clothing, you need to know 3 marks. And you only need to know 2 things about each one of those 3 marks. You have the straight line in order to make all the different things that happen in a shirt. Then from there, you have the hook or the V or the check mark. And the next line you need to learn is a simple curve. Pretty simple. Now, the big thing that you need to know about these 3, the smaller and thinner a line that you create, the harsher the V you create, and the subtler the curve you make. We are talking about fabrics in the silk area, thin fabrics, soft fabrics. If you want thicker, heavier fabrics. Let's see here. You are going to want harsher lines. We are going to want big V's, and we are going to want big, bold curves. And that just shows how thick the fabric is. So for something like a common t-shirt here, we're going to want something more in the lines of a thinner fabric. And of course, anything in between there can show you anything from a super thin fabric to a super thick fabric. So like any level in between, it's just something to keep in mind when you're doing a piece. If you're doing a sweater, you're going to want these thick, heavy curves. And if you're doing just a simple t-shirt, we're going to be in the more softer, thinner area. So now for the next piece that we're going to want to do when we're doing curves, let's go ahead and kind of work on our chest area. Ta-da, we got a guy. That part's pretty much done at this point. Now, if we're wanting to do a girl, we can actually thin this up a little bit. And boobs kind of go a little bit, for anime anyway, boobs kind of go a little bit past the rib cage. Now, we got a side view of the rib cage here. Let's go ahead and say maybe the rib cage comes in more like this. So it's a little bit narrower, it comes down into our body area. So we're going to bring the t-shirt in just a little bit more for a girl. Again, we want to follow that rib cage. To an extent. Not always 100%, but at some point the clothing does have to touch the body in order to make it, in the shape of an actual body. Now, because we're leaning this direction, we actually don't have to bring the fabric in over here, because gravity is taking our fabric in this direction. So because of that, we can actually change even some of these things. So it's a little bit less extreme here. Perhaps a little bit more extreme over this way. Now, when it comes to drawing the upper area, it's not just a couple of balls, but this is kind of giving me an idea, where do they go? I know where they go, but just saying. So if we were to do the neck area, that V that goes where the collarbone is, let's say more about, so I need to go this way a little bit more. So the neck area, you got the collarbone, you got those tendons in the neck. I'm very lightly going to draw an X with that, as if in a straight line, like so. I'm going to extend that just a little bit further. All right, so that's kind of telling me where, a little bit better, where the boobs need to go. Now, we got nice and round. What would be the bottom if the person was standing very straight? But we don't know. Considering some of your ages, you probably don't know. Let's not go over that. But, let's see here. We're going to go ahead and make the bottom portion where gravity is going round. And they're not perfect balls. They're not perfectly round. They have some flat areas. So we're going to swoop in. And then this is where, for instance, the arm would be. So we have this kind of area. Now, because of this arm being closed, actually joins up just a little bit differently. It's a little bit of a swoop and a curve, like so. There we go. Now that I know where they are, and I've drawn way too dark, but I need you guys to see what I'm doing. Let's call it shading. Yeah. Mistakes that happen to end up looking like creativity. So this is where our chest is for a woman, so it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to bring this line in for the shirt. And again, remember how our ribs were more like so right here? So we'll just go ahead and follow that line. Erase. Looking less and less like a guy all the time. Now, obviously, the boobs are not on top of the t-shirt. So we'll go ahead and draw this line in. So we got a area that kind of, let me show you a cleaner version. Looks like that. So this is this area. No, more like this area right here. So you can kind of see now we have a natural fold of the fabric going on. I'm going to make this all a little bit lighter for myself. Of course, I've drawn so dark I can try to erase it and I won't be able to erase it. But now we are going to be using basically curves, and they're going to be subtle curves. And because, again, gravity's pulling this way, all of my lines need to kind of be showing that. Everything wants to move this way. And this is one way to show motion. The way you put your lines in is a great way to show motion. And lines also help draw the eye into places where you would rather people be looking. So you're going to be, by putting lines that all are going in this direction, you're going to be bringing the person's eye from the top of the body down through the body and, over. So you're going to make the eye look like it's following in a C shape. Normally the eye starts from the top and works its way down, usually. So, all right, we're traveling across the body. Let's go ahead and give this boob a little bit more shape in the shirt. And because the shirt is obviously following the line of the boob, this line will stay here. This line would never be this dark. But this line would be here, and you might end up having a line coming out to follow. And we see how the lines are accenting that there is the shape of something there. But if you could completely erase, unlike how I've done this, you would not actually see the boobs themselves in the shirt. It would just be the hint of. But I've gotten overzealous. All right, so we've got these curve lines coming through here. This is a straight line now because our shoulders are pretty much going at this angle right now. That means a lot of other lines and such would be doing the same. Starting going in this way. Now, the next thing to know when you're doing fabrics is places where they're bunched up, like here in the armpit areas, you will have a lot of lines coming out of those areas because you got a lot of folds. All that fabric's gotten folded up underneath into the armpit. And in areas where there's a lot of motion and pulling, for instance, by this arm going up, all this area is getting pulled. All this fabric's being pulled. So you're going to have several lines going this way. Maybe not that much. You don't have to do tons and tons of lines. Overdo it and you're going to look like you have a character with a silk t-shirt that has been laying at the bottom of the clothes pile, waiting to be washed, and they haven't washed it and they ran out of clothes and it was just whatever they could find that looked moderately decent at the time. So it's going to be wrinkly and nasty looking. We're just going to put a few. So I'm going to put this one here, and a lot of knowing where to put your lines without thinking about it. Like, how do I know to put this one here? Well, I've looked at a lot of t-shirts. That's the best answer I can give you. I've watched and studied how fabric moves with the body moving. A great anime to watch to see this would be Dragon Ball Z. It was one of my first animes, and that's how I started learning how to actually draw clothing. That one's a great one. Sailor Moon, if you want to do skirts, is a good one. Unfortunately, I never watched Naruto. But I would imagine its anime style is very similar to Dragon Ball Z, so I would say it's probably also a good one too. The only one thing is it seems like they wear a lot of blacks, and it's hard to see the lines in black fabric when it's animated. So we got all these lines. Now I'm going to take this curve line. Now in order to show bagginess, that's what these V's are for. It kind of shows folds. So I'm going to just kind of do that there and put a fold or a large amount of fabric. It's a big empty space of t-shirt. Why not? And you know what? I'm going to go even a step further than before because that body line was here. I'm going to go ahead because I want to. I'm going to draw that in just a little bit closer. And if you want to, if you can see how this little area, because there's so much fabric getting folded over, that ends up feeling, because of how big it is, more like a sweater. So I'm going to bring that back a little bit. Lines, and there we go. Now it feels like it's falling over the body. It feels like there is a body there because our body line has now pretty much been eaten. The only things that aren't touching the skin is this little fold area here and this little area that kind of poops out. And that's great. That's fine. You can shrink and enlarge and change as you want to. If you want something to look more sexy and more feminine, it's going to be more body fitting. If you want something to be bulkier and comfy, like, it's a cold day and you just want to snuggle in your jammy pants, you make it less form-fitting, baggier, and bigger. So, since this is a dancer, I've decided on a whim, I've decided to probably a little bit more form-fitting. Now, because of all this fabric that's getting pushed this way, because of movement and because of gravity, and plus, it would not be form-fitting on this side, because that's where all the excess fabric went, right? I'm going to make this line also into a V. Now, something about V's, they do kind of travel in packs with curves. So sometimes at the bottom of a V, you can put a curve to make it feel like there's more fabric there. Like so. And now for this part of the shirt, I put this straight line in. Now, because it's all bunched up, like I said earlier. So I'm going to put a few more straight lines in this one. I don't know. A little bit of a curve feels good right there. And I think I'm going to put a tight one down here too. They're all joining up and coming out of this armpit area. Now, something else that you can add, I want to get rid of my shoulder lines there. Something else you can add if you want. Very finely, very carefully, could put in some dots to, show like a sew seam, like, how shirts are. And that's why this area tends to be a little bit more pointy, because then it implies that sewed on arm area. And when you put these sew seams, you can put just a few little lines on either side of them to really hammer home that sleeve's, sewn on. Now for pants. Give her some clothes. Pants will come out into your square area, but then they will follow the curve of the body, like so. Now, depending on if your girl is thin enough where she has thigh gap, or not, maybe she's a bigger girl. Like so. You can do that in a variety of different ways. I mean, there's all kinds of body types out there. But for those of you who might be interested in how do you draw the thigh gap area, avoiding certain words here, how do you draw that and make that feel realistic without making it look kind of absurd? Now, one way, we can put our button up here. And if you put basically a more or less a curve, just like the clothing curve, and you want to put a subtle one, otherwise you're going to turn it into a boy. Then we put a little hook or our V there. That's too much. Just follow some lines. We're still following that leg shape. The fly of jeans. And there we go. It looks flat. Now, if you end up making this curve too much, if you make this too round of an area, then we're getting like, okay, is this a girl or is this a dude kind of territory. It's just a slanted curve, or a slanted straight line, and then I put a little hook on it. You don't have to put the hook there if you don't want to. It's not that big of a deal. So we're going to go ahead and put our waistband on. And the only reason I showed you how to do this is I remember having a very hard time drawing this area because eventually I found an artist who did show how to draw a thigh gap. And then everything made sense afterwards when I was drawing characters like that. Now, belt loops. Belt loops are a little bit bigger. And that's pretty much just think of it like a C. Because this is drawn so small, we don't have to get super detailed. We don't have to, because we know that, jeans, they will have those sew sides on the belt loops and things. We don't need to do all those details. That's not important information. And there we go. We have, that's probably a little too extreme. Belt loops done. And now the less line, normally in pants, especially when you're drawing girls, guys, it's a little bit different because they don't wear pants nearly as tight as girls, so they will have, some lines in their pants, the feeling of excess fabric. Girls don't do that. Girls typically wear tighter pants, especially when it comes to the top area. So we can just pretty much leave it like so. And there we have clothes. Just a couple of key things to point out. It is perfectly okay to make some hump areas and to bunch up the fabric in areas where it goes past the skin. If you keep everything super skin tight, until you add color to whatever it is, it's just going to look like skin. It's not going to look like clothing. But adding the little details and things and some areas that come off. Now, if you want to make it look like a sweater, these areas are going to be huge and great big. If you're doing thinner fabrics like this, they're going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit understated. And there might not be as many because, again, this is a thinner fabric. It's going to just want to hang straight. And with jeans and tighter pants areas, you can pretty much take this look all the way down. The only areas on pants that you're going to worry about as far as adding your folds and your curves and your straights are going to be the crotch area and your knees. And if they're pants that kind of flare out, near the bottom, let's say there's a knee in here and this is the calf area and, so on. Foot. This is the area of the pants where you're going to want to add, large folds and some lines. If they're straight legs or skinny jeans, you're basically in your knee areas only if the knee is bent. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very straight with maybe one or two areas that come off of the skin in just a couple places. And maybe not even on both knees. It's entirely up to you and how you want to make that look. So yeah, and now I want to show you really quick how to do fluttery things, like for instance a skirt or a cape. So I'm going to go over here. The difference between a skirt and a cape is length, what it pretty much comes down to. So I got myself a skirt here. I'm going to go ahead and I don't wear skirts, so I have no idea what the tops of them look like really. But skirt here. Now, there's the outside of it. The important thing to know with skirts is curves. And you can just curve, curve, curve. And then you have anti-curve, anti-curve, anti-curve. And what does this do? we can add some straight lines to it. And then add some straight lines here. I'm going to make this curve a little bit bigger so that way it doesn't line up with the lines of the top there. That's normally the way I end up seeing it a lot. Doesn't look fab. If you're going for a look like this, it actually looks much nicer. You do straight lines. And then here you put another curve area that eventually meets up with the curved lines that you see up here. And then swoop, wiggle, 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 wiggle. Let's do some more wiggles. From here, we can add straight lines, and those straight lines end up looking a lot more interesting overall. Gives it a lot more poof than before. It gives it a lot more layer. Now let's say maybe this was a cheerleader skirt. Something, you know, vaguely along those lines anyway. And now you got this super cute, realistic, and fancier look just by going swoop. And these swoops and curves, they can be cut short. They can be jags. And the more curve and swoops you give them, the more interesting it looks, the more foldy it looks, the more fabric-y it looks, the more excess there is. You can draw this longer, and you got a really cool dress, and you can layer it. Maybe this is the first layer of a dress, and then you got a top layer that goes over that. And look, we got a layered skirt. As soon as I erase this part. There we go. That looks better. And you can layer, 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 layer. To your heart's content. Go nuts. So, this is a little clothing tutorial showing you a little bit about skirts, a little bit about pants. The most important part of pants, I think. Because the other parts, it's just a lot of the same. It's paying attention to basically the knees. Just pay attention to your knee area when you're when you're doing pants, and how, you know, the fabric basically is pulled, bunched into the back of the knee, and how it extends outwards from there. And honestly, to me, when I was learning, this area was the most difficult area. I'm not sure what words I'm allowed to use, so I'm trying to be subtle. So this is a pretty difficult area. Knowing how the pants attach, always remember to, you know, let it come past a little bit. Even on a skirt, when you put a skirt on a person, it's still going to at least just a little bit, so that way it looks like it's on somebody. This little area, there's the side. That's here, and then around. And that makes it feel like our skirt is on a body. These little areas, how you make your fabrics and your clothes disappear around the back, is very crucial to feeling like there's something there. And then we went over t-shirts, and a lot of what you learn from t-shirts, you just apply to a lot of the other spots. So I want to see you guys become custom designers. I want you to draw your own bodies. You can do them just facing you. We're not necessarily going for interesting poses as much as I want to see that you guys have learned more about how to draw clothing. So we want to go with design your own clothes, do what you want. Do send me pictures, or you can have your parents, because I need to see the tiny little details, the little areas that are very difficult to see on FaceTime stuff. Have your parents send me your artwork over to Taff, and she'll send it back to me, or you can send it to me. And there I am, Kenya, just like the country, F-E-R-R, 2 R's, A-N-D, at live.com. And send me those over so that way I can really get a good look at what it is you guys are playing with. And I want to see, you can draw pants separately. That's fine. We're not judging on how proportional the bodies are right now. You can show me pants separately. I want to see a t-shirt or some sort of top. And you can do a skirt or a cape, however you like. Just want to see you guys try to focus on fabrics and clothing. So I will see you guys all for the next one, and I hope you have a great week.